Okay, then. Okay, then. I'm about to spread that around there. You know what I'm doing? Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I know. I know. We still keep in contact.
Testing.
All this start going. Yeah.
Rachel, you need an office over here. You gonna get so much. I'm gonna tell Miss Harris, we gotta get you additional office. Oh, okay, then, because you're over here constantly.
How are you?
I'm on to
You'll get it. They don't let him. They don't let me upstairs.
Is now joining.
Whoa. I got how much? What? Good.
Yeah. I can't believe it. 6-4, you got friends. But you get rid of it. You just stick it. Well, you can get rid of it. Yeah. I still call. Where's it going?
I want him to stay in state. But they give him a full ride. All the way. Full ride. I know.
That's awesome.
Full ride. How the books and but somebody case Montgomery. Yeah. I know. I told him. I want him to stay in state.
Well, you can't. He can come back and teach us all. Well, that's all. Congratulations.
Session, how you doing, sir? How you doing there? Oh, okay, okay, I'll make sure. Thank you, sir. So how y'all doing there?
Not for very long. I played.
Hey, I'm gonna see, yes. They won't show up. They're not showing up. Oh, there you go. Oh, it's a bad car.
Yeah.
Guess I can tell what the broke is. We told him last Yeah, just don't be good. Just, there you go. 20, 59, 65, 85. Get everything changed like it does. Need to work close. Close. That's what the judge said to do. You still got signs on it. Like I even got signs. Don't breathe. Why not put it right beside it? I mean. Hey, how are you doing? You're out there, Georgia. Just right at the bridge, you got a sign. Left lane, no truck flying. 75. Ever so many bridges, every few bridges, that's how this way. No trucks flying.
Okay.
Just like I said, every you can call, somebody got They just off the wall there. Not even, it's out in the middle. No, it, no, it didn't. It is right. Put besides up to 76. That's fun. That's what we're doing. Like, we're gonna go check the mile mark, and say Thursday. They're closer to 20 miles off.
It's 5 minutes after the appointed hour, so we will call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Allen, Baker, Chambliss,
Here.
Chasteen, Madison, Elliott, Gavan, Paul, Harbison, Hollis, Lawrence, McCampbell, Martin, Milson, Paramore, Price, Schofield, Sells, Sessions, Shaver,
Yeah, I go slow.
Shed, Singleton, Mitherman, Wagner, Wilcox, Wood. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All righty, we have a quorum, and we will be continuing to monitor the online Teams meeting and make sure we have everybody there. So don't worry, we see you and we got you. If we have any questions toward the end, we'll ask specifically as far as attendance is concerned. We welcome everybody here. I think everyone has in their packet minutes from the previous meeting. You on virtual, you may not have received those yet. We will get those to you. With that, we'll just file those minutes. All righty, we'll get into old business. We do want to welcome Representative Marks, a new member of the committee, and appreciate you being here today. All righty, the first, if you all will, on the Teams meeting, will you all mute your mics, please? Okay, I think that gets us. I think we're good to go now. So the first item on the agenda is to review Act 2023-534, and most all of the legislators should know about this act, but just for the general information and discussion, this act is going to change the way that we elect our chairs, the timing of all that, the rotation, that sort of thing. This bill went through our legislative committee and then to the full committee and was approved at both, and then went to the legislature, was approved there and signed into law. So the way that our elections will happen in the future, at the fourth quarterly meeting of the first year of each quadrennium, which is this year, the fourth meeting is in October. So in October of this year, we will have elections that will be for the next 4 years. So the election will be first for the House to chair the JTC, and that will be for 2 years. And then the vice chair will also be selected in October and will serve as vice chair for 2 years, and then those two will swap. So the Senate chair will be the fourth year of the quadrennium and the first year of the following quadrennium. And that's to provide a little bit of continuity across the quadrenniums. And we think that'll be better. If it's not, we'll figure out a better way at that time. But we think it beats what we had been doing right in the middle of the year and having elections and when does one start, when does one end, that kind of thing. So let's see, is there anything else? I did mention the swap from House to Senate chairs. Yeah, House to Senate chairs. Also, we did not have anything in the law about if the chair or vice chair becomes vacant. So we have added language to address that. If the chair becomes vacant, the vice chair becomes the chair. And then at the next meeting, a new chair, we'll say the House chair becomes vacant, then a new House chair would be elected. The vice chair would serve until then. Common common sense type stuff. So are there any questions or comments? Don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think everybody kind of knows what we're doing here, but just wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page going forward. Okay, hearing no questions, that will be just as a matter of information, and we will move on. The next item is the Alabama Transportation Institute Alabama Bridge Project, and I'll turn it over to the Vice Chair, Representative Margie Wilcox, and you can take it from here.
All right, Vaughn and I have been working on this, and the Alabama Transportation Institute. Is anybody here today from that organization? Okay, they've been very helpful in creating the Bridging Alabama, and our first event is planned for Gee's Bend, which we've discussed that before. And we're trying to decide whether to add the Edmund Pettus Bridge into this. This Alabama Roadshow promises to be an experience for all legislative members, not just the Joint Transportation Committee, as we embark on a captivating journey celebrating the bridges that connect our communities and shape our state's history. With an opportunity to explore covered bridges, marvel at structural wonders, and engage in insightful discussions. These events will leave a lasting impression on all those who attend. Let's come together to honor our past, embrace the present, and build a stronger, connected future for Alabama. So, as I first mentioned, Gee's Bend is our first event, and we are looking at the date of, Vaughn, you want to chip in here? Let's see. August the 29th or the 30th. And right now, we do have an availability on the 29th at one of the, so we plan on meeting at one section of the Gee's Bend and then ride the ferry over, have lunch, and then ride back. So I know it's a little hot in August, but we've got to get these started during the off season. So do you have any questions or concerns? The Camden terminal can comfortably accommodate about 50 people. We've got a schedule of the ferry, but they may design a special schedule for us while we're there. We're coordinating with the Department of Transportation. We're going to have a luncheon, and the invitation should go out the first week of August. And then we do want to make sure, in order to have enough lunches, that everybody RSVPs in a timely manner. But on the discussion on the Gee's Bend, whether we add the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Baker.
Madam Chair, so would that be on the 29th or 30th, or did you narrow that down? I wasn't clear on that.
Which date were they? 29th. The 29th is the one that's shaping up to be the date.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions of the members? Given the distance that people will travel to go, I would like to accommodate the Edmund Pettus Bridge at the same time as we do the Gee's Bend, but I'd like the committee's input on that. Some, you know, like the Transportation Institute and Vaughn, we're thinking that might be a little bit too far apart. They're about an hour apart. Is that right, Vaughn?
Hour and 30 minutes.
So what time would we start?
9 a.m., between 9 and 9:30.
Between 9 and 9:30.
Lunch served at noon, and then that would be the end.
Why don't you put your mic on so we can hear you?
Be done by 1 o'clock, Mr. Chairman.
Would you put your mic on and tell us?
Starting between 9 and 9:30 and finishing by 1 o'clock that afternoon.
Okay.
And Representative Lawrence has got the Gee's Bend quilters that will be there. And what else do you have planned for us, sir? Turn your mic on and entice us to your area.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I did want to say was, I think if we're going to incorporate the Edmund Pettus Bridge, we probably need to start on the Gee's Bend side, because I think just depending on kind of where everybody is coming from, it will be easier to access the Edmund Pettus Bridge through Selma on the Gee's Bend side versus starting on the Camden side. Just logistically, I think that would be better for everyone. But I know everyone is coming in from different parts of the state. But if we're going to incorporate Gee's Bend, I think it would be best if we I mean, we're going to incorporate Edmund Pettis Bridge. That it would be best if we all meet in Selma and have some type of transportation to take us to G's Bend and then back. Because navigating, if it's 50 of us navigating 50 cars on a ferry is going to be hard to do. I would just suggest that if all possible.
And how long does it take to get from the Edmund Pettis Bridge to G's Bend?
About an hour. About an hour.
If there's no further questions, I give it back to the chair. That's what we know at this point, and we'll formulate some of this more information into that.
Okay, so all the members could look at getting an email around the 1st of August that has all these details finalized and go from there.
Right, and please make sure to discuss it with the other members of the legislature, because this is not just open to the Joint Transportation Committee, and it's not just open to the people in that region. We're opening up to all the members of the legislature.
Okay. So, and I assume that email will go to all members as well. Okay. All right. We may want to do a save the date in the next day or so that, folks could put it on their calendar. Might help. So.
I agree. Madam Clerk, would you see to that save the date memo out an email? Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the first meeting of the Bridge Show? Okay.
In Alabama.
It's going to be neat, especially some of the bridges that we may not have seen before, and the ferry, obviously. It's going to be a very educational time. So, okay, with that, we'll move on to new business. The first item is Representative Phil Pettis, left lane driving signage on the interstates. Representative Pettis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Guess we're back same as we were the last meeting. Department of Transportation said they were be in compliance as of this date. They're still not in compliance of the law. I don't know if they just can't read the law or they can't count, but it's easy to figure. It's like I-65, you come up and they got one at the 50, have a sign at the 100, 150, and then it just wherever. There's no rhyme or reason in a multiple of 50 there's any signs. The 200 sign is, I think it's in your district. If I'm not mistaken, it's right below Clanton. There's no sign there. I don't know why. There's nothing out there to preventing them from having a sign. Also, the law also specifically says that every interchange with another interstate, there'll be signage. I've rode 65, 85, 20, 59, 459, no signs. I just don't know what we got to do to get DOT to be in compliance with the law. I mean, the law is very specifically says where the signs will be. DOT even wrote the law. I mean, you'd think they could follow their own law if they wrote it. But I'm here to request help again to get DOT to follow the state law that Senator Elliott always talks about them following law. They always said they can't do something for him because of the law, but when it's something specific for them, it's like they can't follow the law.
Okay.
I get complaints all the time. You passed this law. Why can't we get signs? So,
is there any questions for Representative Pettis or discussion?
I'll know that you said that the Southwest region is in compliance.
Well, on I-65, all the way up to the 150, they are in compliance. So when it gets to the 200, there's not one at the 200. From there on, they're all just off the wall where they're at.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sessions.
Representative Pettis, so they're also supposed to have them like at the interchanges where 10 and 65
Yes.
go together, or 65.
Yes.
So they're supposed to have those signage there saying.
At 110,
Yeah.
at 85, just around here that I've looked, there is none.
I haven't seen any down on I-10 and 65.
And then the law specifically says at every interchange, or, they can move them a little bit. But to me, there's one, I think it's something 38. I don't know if it's 338. And I said, I can't figure anywhere where 50 goes into 238 an even number of times. So it's just sparingly, but it also says like at 85, where 85 and 65 cross, right in there should be a sign on 80. Well, 85's got to have one anyhow within the first 2 miles. And on 65, there should be one close to the intersection by what the law says.
Gotcha.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Mr. Pettis. Is there anybody from the DOT that would like to address this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of things, I guess, to respond. So Representative Pettis is correct from the standpoint of 150. We're on the 50-mile increments. I think it's important to note that we believe in the law it says that we have discretion to put these signs in places that don't have to fall right at an even divisible 50. So not at 200, we can put it within 50 miles. There's actually one at 190. So it's 40 miles from the previous one. So we actually meet the standard by 10 miles. And then from the 190, we go to 240. So we pick the 50 back up, but we didn't want to go back to 250 because then we're more than 50 miles beyond. There was a reason why we couldn't put it right at the 200. And the law says in there that there's some discretion for ALDOT to address those. We believe if you look at the information we forwarded you in February to you and Representative Wilcox, we believe we're at 50 miles or less. In all situations, there's two that we go a couple miles over just because of interchanges and some other things that are conflicting with putting them right at 50 miles. But on 65, we're inside the 50 to his example. So
two things. If I recall correctly, when you sent that, some of that was proposed. So if you would you just resend that as, now that it's completed in y'all's eyes anyway, if y'all will send that to us, we'll get it out to the full committee so that they can look at it. The second part of that is around the interchanges and what's the issue there?
Sure, so be glad to talk about that. At most intersection of interstates, we're not on a 4-lane footprint. We're on a 6, 8, even in some cases in Birmingham, a 10-lane footprint. For us to put these signs up to be effective, you have to be able to put them on both shoulders, the right and left shoulder. It does you no good to put a sign that says stay right on the right lane if they're driving in the left lane. In those sections where the interstates come together, in almost every case, all the aprons, the areas, the shoulders, the median, there is no median, and we have paved aprons in there, and in many cases, it's just the high dividers, the barrier rails that's separating the traffic flows. There's no way from a safety perspective for us to put them there. And we also feel like in those areas, it's information overload already for our drivers. If we start trying to put signs in there that conflict or also have to be talking about things that are regulatory information, things like speed limits, what routes you're on, it becomes harder to see those. But the biggest thing is safety related. We don't have a comfort level asking our people to put them. We don't put signs on left shoulders in situations where we don't have medians. So again, we use the discretion that we believe the law says to address that.
So would it be, I guess I'm just thinking through what you're saying, and some of that makes sense, but I shouldn't say some of it. That makes sense.
Oh, I heard that.
So the intent, I guess, of the law is associated with people driving in the left lane and blocking traffic.
Right.
So I guess, and maybe we can look back at the language of the law but maybe when you are transitioning from those multi-lanes back to 2 lanes each direction, maybe is that the appropriate place for it?
It could be. So I felt I needed to answer the questions that he was asking, but ultimately what I would like to offer Representative Pettis, if he's willing to, we've provided that map, the mile marker post information that tells you where they're at. I'll resend that to you. You feel free to share it with the committee, obviously. There's even photos of each of the signs. We've installed 116 of these signs across the state already. We would be happy to sit down with Representative Pettis, let him tell us where he thinks they should be that are not compliant, and we will either put them there if they need to be there, or we'll give him a reason why we believe the law says we have the discretion to consider not putting them there. I'm happy to have that discussion with him if he's willing to do that.
Okay. Representative Wilcox.
In those high traffic areas like Birmingham and in the Mobile, maybe even the Mobile area, where you have the electronic overhead message boards, would that be an appropriate way to substitute? If you have it on that one that's overhead, don't you have that going into Birmingham that
They are, but they're not necessarily located at the intersection. So the ones going into Birmingham are several miles back from the 459 interchange in that case, Representative. So we don't have those overhead signs located at the intersection of the interstates. Those are usually located prior to getting into the urban areas so that we can tell you if there's traffic condition issues, those types of things.
But would that be an acceptable substitute? That might be something that I would say.
Right.
Those are attention-getting signs.
Right. Let us ask. So Federal Highway Administration is extremely specific on what they will let us put on those signs in many cases. Let us have that discussion. I don't want to tell you that we can or can't until we clarify with them.
One question and then Senator Sessions.
Sure.
Will you remind me what it says on the signs?
Sure. State law, keep right except to pass. So there's a big, I think, a yellow sign across the top that says state law, and then underneath it on the sign says keep right except to pass.
Senator Sessions.
Yeah, Representative Wilcox kind of hit on what I was thinking about, and not necessarily regardless of where they're at, but if the federal highway will allow you to do it, wouldn't it be a good idea to use all our electronic signs throughout the state, regardless of where they're at, on the interstates, to put that message up there? I would think that would help.
Sure.
We'd run it as much as you could when it's not congestion or when it's not busy or something like that.
When there's not an emergency.
Yeah, when there's no emergencies or no other messages that you really need to be getting out there, I would think that would be a good use of those signs.
So Mr. Harris just told me we have been running those the last several months.
Okay, great.
So they're already, I was not even aware of that either.
Yeah,
so,
super.
So you and I both missed them. So,
yeah.
But yes, according to Mr. Harris, we have started running those several months back now.
Okay, good. Representative Wood.
Thank you. I traveled 85 here, and there were clearly some individuals that needed a sign that I got behind that were going a little too slow in the lane. So I love the opportunity that you've stated to meet with Representative Pettis and come up with an idea. I think we just want the signs. I don't think we're so caught up on where they go unless he is. We just need those signs out there so individuals will see them and hopefully abide by what we would like them to do.
Sure. No, I follow you. And like I said, we believe, other than his point about it, the interstate interchanges. And again, in those cases, we don't have any signs on the left shoulder. And as such, because we don't have a left shoulder. So that's it becomes a safety issue for our people, because if you put them up, they'd have to be maintained. They'll get hit. We've got concern about putting our people out on the shoulder like that of a busy interstate. So.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? So I think where we're going from here is you're going to resend that updated information to us. We'll get it out to the committee. And then at that point, Representative Pettis will work with you. And if there's specific areas that have a question or issue, then we will work specifically on those. And then also contemplate the idea of not at the intersection, but where the intersection transitions back to 4 lanes. Anyway, that's just an idea. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but.
No, I follow you. We've had contemplated that as well, but not knowing if that was going to suffice his questions, because as he said he asked this meeting or two ago. And so we felt like it was probably better to wait until we had this discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is discussion of the JTC report in compliance with section 29.2.4B6. Ms. Riddle, this is and you'll probably say all this, but is a report that's required in the law. So.
Afternoon, everyone. This is our department's first year being involved, and with the passage of SB 233, Senator Chambliss reached out to me and asked me if this was something we would be willing to do. And obviously, we're legislative staff, so we're willing to do anything you ask us. So I'm saying all that to say, this report is the first time this has been done and compiled like this. There's probably a better way we can make it more user-friendly. It is a lot of information, and I don't know if you noticed from our email the one we sent out electronically where you could see it was way, way, way bigger than what we could put out for the public. But I've always said, and I said in this report, anybody from the public that wanted to see the more, we have, of course, you have access to that or not. We kind of were time crunched, and I was not involved as much in this process as I would have liked to have been, because this was all towards the end of session. And like I said, this was our first time doing it, but we have worked with ALDOT to get this out and have asked that moving forward, we come up with a better process for getting the information to you, and then we can do some better analysis for you moving forward. That's my hope and goal, if y'all still want us to do this year to year and make this report to you. My state division director that is very versed is always out at ALDOT doing federal audits or regular legal compliance audits. He actually put this together for our department. So I'm going to let him do the quick presentation of a summary of what he did to make y'all be in compliance with the law. One other thing I did want to say is anyone listening that is a member of the public and wants to see the report, it is on our website. You can search under audit reports, and then you can also go under special reports, and we put things like this there. So that's where it is available to the public. At this point, I want to introduce James Hall. He's, like I said, my state division director, and he's going to go over real quick what he put together.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for allowing us to come. Again, my name is James Hall. As Ms. Riddle said, I was tasked with doing this. I was not asked, I was tasked. So there is a big difference sometimes on that. So what we had to do was we had to actually look at the law 2942 to see what was required. And that requirement was to compare the actual performance of the highway department as far as the terms of the highway construction, the maintenance, and cost to the original plan. So therefore, to do this, we had to start somewhere. And part of that was we had to actually get the original plan with amendments from DOT. That is on their website. In our report, that is actually labeled Exhibit Number 1. And that is the majority of the report. So that entire report, probably over half of it is the highway plan itself. Excuse me. So to make a comparison of what we were actually doing, we had to determine where we would actually start. Okay, so for a project to start, what does that actually mean? Does that mean the project was let? Does that mean the project was bid? There are so many different factors. We had to have a benchmark or some marker to say the project had started. So being accountants and auditors, we decided the most money. Did they expend money? So if they expended money, that's what we consider to be started. We understand that DOT has a different set of markers on when projects were started, and that is part of their report and part of their responses. So once we determined if a project was started, then we had to determine actually, from our perspective, what is a project? When we first got into this, we were thinking, okay, a project. A project is it the bridge over, a bridge replacement over I-65? Is it adding lanes to a US Highway 280 somewhere? Well, that is a project, but under that project, there are multiple things that happen. And DOT actually breaks everything down by, I think it's called database level ID. So you have pre-engineering, that is part of the project. You have, preliminary engineering. You have maybe right-of-way construction or acquisition. You have utility relocation. You actually have construction. So you have to look at all of that to determine, where we're going to be. So, excuse me. So from our perspective, we determined the project level, we would go all the way down as much detail as we could get, which is the database level, to see utility, the utility relocation. That is a project. That's the level we went to. Okay. So once we determined that, we reached out to ALDOT and requested that they provide us with a listing of the fiscal year 22 projects that in their view had started. And they provided us a record or a listing of all projects they considered starting, which included the county, It included the project reference number. It included the original budget amount, amended budget amount, and expenditures. So we had our benchmark for expenditures. Okay. And that particular response is Exhibit 3. So if you're looking, want to follow along, that would be Exhibit 3 in your report. So once we requested that information, what we did, we took their master plan and we started evaluating and extracting which programs were actually projects were to start in 22. They were scheduled to start. And so we extracted that out, and there were approximately about 575, excess of 575 projects that were scheduled to begin in fiscal year 22. Okay, that is in your report as well. That's, I think, exhibit number 2. Okay, so, you know, again, a lot of information. So you get past exhibit 1 and exhibit 2, that's 90% of the report. So once we got the report, we got our extracted data, we got our list from DOT, that's when we went and we started cross-referencing and scheduling what, you know, to try to match them up. When we were doing that cross-match, we noticed there were 110 projects that were scheduled to begin, but according to DOT's list, had not started. Okay? That information, and DOT, excuse me, so that DOT, once we saw these 110 things, we contacted DOT. They provided an explanation of what happened. That is included in the report as well. That's part of exhibit number 4. So as any good auditor, when you compare one way, we compared what was on what they said they did to the list. We also compared the list backwards to what they did. You know, kind of going both ways to see if there were any projects that they started during 22 that were not on the 22 list. We did not note any projects that were started during 22 that were not on the 22 scheduled list. So once we started looking at the projects that they identified as being started, we were looking at the budget amounts, the expenditures, and we noted that there were approximately 100, I think, about 112 projects that were identified as being started that did not have any expenditures. We reached back out to DOT regarding that, and they did provide a response. There were some projects that they did not prepare a response for, and I think that was approximately 50 projects they did not originally provide a response. Subsequently, they did provide a response for about 10. Even after the report was being processed, the chief financial officer reached out to me. They had some more responses. We did not have time to put them in the response to you. Excuse me. One thing I would mention is that when you look at the expenditures on the report, compare them to budget, sometimes it can be, I don't want to say misleading, but you have to have the whole picture. Road projects, and DOT can speak to this more than we can, of course, they're multi-year projects. So the budget may be $500,000 or $5 million. They only expended $500,000. It's because the project may be going to be a 5-year project as far as construction. So sometimes you cannot just look at the numbers, but it has to be taken into context.
So, Mr. Hall,
yes,
as I read through all that information, there were, I guess, 2 or 3 categories of why a project would not necessarily. Can you go over some of those generally in that category? I know it seemed like there were 3 or 4 that were kind of common reasons why, legitimate reasons why a project didn't start.
Yes, you mean the ones that were identified as not be identified as not identified as being started, or not identified as having expenditures?
Yes.
Okay. For the projects that were on the STIP but not identified by ALDOT as being on the STIP, approximately 80% of or 80 responses of the 110 projects, the response from ALDOT was for a project to be included on the list we submitted, it had to be on the 22 STIP, be authorized, have a project start date in fiscal year 22. If the project did not meet all the requirements, it was not included on our list. In this instance, the project status is closed, therefore it is not included on the list we submitted. That was the majority. Also, there were 59 responses that the project did not have any expenditures because it was projected to start in 23. Even though the original, I guess, was 22, once they got into it, it was the projected start date may have been 23, but that is something that ALDOT would be more to speak on as far as projection dates changing. As far as projects identified by ALDOT as being started but not having expenditures, a lot of those were dealing with seasonal delays. That was a lot of it. Some were, the delays may have been due to authorization by an entity to be started, but again, always project delays and everything. Just looking at one of them was, the project was due to be let in the summer of 24. So, again, all of these responses were included in here, and we tried to do it, exactly quoting what they sent to us.
Mm-hmm. So the point, I guess, of all that is that there is some lead lag time when you put a project on a list before it actually gets to the point of expenditures. And it's not like we put it on a list one day and we start it the next. There's some planning that goes into all that.
Yes, sir. And one thing, and this STIP also, this STIP is a 2020 to 2023 STIP. So, these are this is a, 4-year plan. They're working now on the 24 STIP. I'm not sure if it's been approved yet, but, these things are so ongoing that there is lag time, I would assume, in these projects. Any other questions from?
Are there comments or questions? I guess one statement that I would make is that obviously this review is a requirement in the law. And in our legislative committee, I proposed that we eliminate this from the law because it's a mountain of work. And is there benefit to it? Well, there's no benefit to it if none of us are looking at it. So the discussion in that committee was that, we needed to keep it in there, so we did. But what I would challenge each of us to do is look at it. And if it's useful information, let's do it. But if I don't hear a lot from everybody, this is really good and we need this, then maybe next session I'll propose that we take it out because it is a mountain of work. So it's good if it's useful, but if it's not, then let's don't do something just to be doing it. So I'll leave that up to you all to determine, and then obviously knowing that if we do it again, if we don't take it out, we will continue to do it, and we may look at more efficient ways to do it, more efficient ways to present it, that kind of thing. So are there any questions for Mr. Hall? Or Ms. Riddle? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your work. I know it was a lot of work and it was something new, so it was a little, and the DOT as well. It's something that it's work for y'all as well. And if there's good use, good benefit, then we need to do that. So let's figure that out as we go. So if there are no other questions or comments on that, we will move on to the next item with ALDOT proposed projects for mega infra and rural US DOT grant programs. Mr. Austin, if you will tell us kind of a little bit about y'all's thoughts on those programs and what y'all are doing.
Yes, sir. Be glad to. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair. So when the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act a couple years ago now, approximately, there were several what's called discretionary programs added to the US DOT. So US DOT is consisting of, I believe, 4 modal agencies, if I remember right: Federal Transit, Federal Rail, Federal Aviation, Federal Highway. So of those 4 modal portions of US DOT, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 discretionary programs that were created through the IIJA. So there have been multiple opportunities to apply for different types of discretionary grants. It's really becoming almost a cottage industry, to be honest with you. When you have 40 particular programs, what it takes to generate one of those applications is not small. It's typically farmed out unless it's by state DOT. Most locals that do one of these, and the vast majority of the ones that have been submitted from Alabama have come from our cities or counties or MPOs or others along those lines. But it's not a small undertaking. Those things look almost like the report that the examiners generated, not quite to that extent, but they're fairly significant 100 to 200 page reports, and you can spend easily $75,000, $100,000 or more putting one of these applications together. So, but from an Alabama perspective, from the state DOT perspective, we have submitted one application through what's called the Mega Infra and Rural Combined Program. So those are the 3 large-scale DOT-centric programs through the discretionary part of IIJA. We submitted an application last year for Mobile River Bridge. That will be the one project that we submit as the applicant this year as well. The deadline for submitting that application, I believe, is about the 3rd week in August. We are working on that. So last year we submitted for that. There were almost 50 more, a factor of 50 from a dollar standpoint, more applications than what was allocated last year. Hold me to a number. I think it was about 10 projects that received funding this past year through the Mega Rural Infra Program. Obviously, Alabama was not one of them. However, there was another 16 or 17 projects that were giving a project of distinction designation by the US DOT, and that was meaningful from the standpoint of, and we did receive that designation, so we came in the second group, I guess. But what benefit that provided us was the opportunity to get a debrief from US DOT and for them to give us some thoughts on where our application maybe was lacking. And so who you turned that into and who we were able to do that debrief with, that's the same office. And so we feel like that was a very beneficial part of that process. We will be submitting the application again. Last year, we submitted for $500 million for Mobile River Bridge. We are still in discussion with the US DOT on what number. The number is a meaningful part of the application. It's not just turning in an application, it's finding a number that presents the right opportunity for them to select projects. And so we're working with them to determine what that good number might look like. Hopefully it's something that we're comfortable submitting. But anyway, we will be submitting that application before the end of the month. From the city-county MPO's perspective, there are dozens of those that have been submitted, but they do not come through ALDOT. We are not the clearinghouse for those. They are submitted directly to US DOT. We are not the recipients of those. We will occasionally get requests, excuse me, for letters of support for those. In many cases, we do provide that, but the applications are not administered by the Alabama DOT, and so therefore we really are not in a position to tell you what the disposition of those are or anything else.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Senator Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ed, thanks for being here today.
Yes, sir.
On the topic of grants, and especially IIJA, most all of those are going to require some sort of match, correct?
Absolutely. In most cases, you're lucky if you can get 50% of a project, and the larger it gets, the percentage obviously tends to move down, not up.
Sure. And I remember about, it's 2 or 3 of these meetings ago, Senator Schofield brought up a question about missing the opportunity of some federal funds because we didn't have the match for them. And obviously that's a missed opportunity. I think we've taken some actions in the last legislative session to try to make sure we allocated some more funds to ALDOT from ALEA to make sure that we had the funding necessary to take advantage of a lot of the new federal programs through IIJA that simply weren't there, weren't necessarily foreseeable before. The question is, do you feel like you have the matching funds necessary so that when we apply for federal funds, either through IIJA or others, do you have the state funding necessary to match what's out there?
Sure. So if I remember correctly, Senator, the discussion with Senator Schofield revolved around a little bit of a different topic. It was related to Rebuild Alabama and the possibility of having to use Rebuild Alabama funds to match our federal allocation if we did not locate some additional state funds. So it wasn't in regards to discretionary applications. So I want to make sure I preface and clarify maybe. There are not programs where we could submit a discretionary grant application that we have not. We've just we're trying to be strategic about those programs to which we apply for. Those all go through, for the most part, one location through the US DOT. What we don't want is to turn in an application from ALDOT for a smaller project for a small amount, get awarded a small one, and then that maybe make it more difficult to justify giving us one on the larger program. We are mustering, we believe it's the smart thing to do is to focus on Mobile River Bridge as our first ask because they have a program in place to request mega projects, large bridge projects. 2 of those 3 programs are specifically geared towards bridges and large scale projects, which we're right in the wheelhouse of. Mm-hmm. And so we've just made the decision to focus on that program. It's not about the ability to match discretionary grants if we were to apply for them.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, a follow-up if I may. Sure. As it relates to bonding capacity and Rebuild Alabama Act, the Act allows for ALDOT to borrow up to 50% of projected revenues, 50% of your portion of projected revenues, so that's 50% of the 66.7 to borrow against future gas tax revenues. So, if you look, this is my very rough back of the napkin math, but if you look at what that number is, it seems to be about $77 million in debt service capacity annually, which would support a principal amount of about $2 billion that you could borrow over a 20-year period, and I'm assuming current interest rates at about 5% or so. So all very rough numbers. But my question is, how much have y'all utilized? What percentage of that 50% capacity have you either, and this goes back to what our examiners were saying, have we either used, obligated, committed? You get the idea. What have we committed out of that capacity?
Right. So to date, we have not done any bonding through the Rebuild Alabama Act. We do have some intentions to do that at a certain time later. As projects advance. Currently, we have not identified from a financial standpoint a need to do that yet. But we do know that as some of the larger projects that we're advancing through the Rebuild Alabama Act move forward, we're likely to have to use that as an option. But we'll just have to wait till we get closer and know what a number is, what our cash flow situation is going to look like for that project versus other rebuild projects. And so currently we're not, I couldn't tell you when that might occur or what that number might look like until we have some more details.
What projects are you looking at using that bonding capacity on at this point?
More than likely West Alabama Highway.
Do you have a projected number? I know you probably just have a range at this point on what that may cost, but do you have an updated range on the cost of that project?
Not yet. So we are at a point where we're about ready to sign an agreement with the firm that was identified. Once we do that, excuse me, the way the progressive design build model works is you make selections based on qualifications. It's not based strictly on a low bid number. So we have, we'll start the negotiation on what they call guaranteed maximum prices, GMPs, as that project progresses, but we have not reached that milestone yet because we've got to get an agreement signed first before we can start that negotiation.
Very good. I'm very interested in what that ends up looking like as compared to the projected cost as you get into that. And obviously, I'm familiar with the progressive design build, and you're using that on Mobile River Bridge and others.
Correct.
As that works its way through. I'm very interested in that and how much of the state's bonding capacity that's going to take up, if you will, as it relates to rebuild, mainly because that's all state funding. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct.
Okay, so 100% state funding, no federal funding, and that may significantly reduce our ability, depending on how much money it takes to, what you have to bond for other big projects in the future.
Potentially, but you're talking about, in many cases, two different funding streams between rebuild and our state public road and bridge fund.
Correct.
So it's apples, and it's somewhat of an apples and oranges comparison in that regard.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, I will move on to Representative Shedd.
If you could, let me ask a quick question on bond issues for highway projects. Something along the lines of what was done in the previous administration, the Garvey bonds. Is that anything you're looking at in the future for other projects across the state?
Currently,
haven't been discussed.
Yes, sir. Currently, we are not. So some of the information that you got in front of you, this fund allocation plan, first page, if you look at it, so the Garvey Bond A-Trip program, which is, I think, what you're referring to, and then the CBD project that we did, the 2059 rebuild through downtown Birmingham, the 2059 I-65 interchange reconstruction that we did 18, 19, 20 timeframe. Both of those are currently debt services being paid and will continue to be paid through 36 or so, 37, I believe, 2037, I believe, Representative. That represents $110 million worth of debt service payments that we've got. That's that we have to pay out of our federal funds. Garvey bonds are federally backed bonds, so we would have to use our federal funds to pay those back. And that's getting close to the limit of what we can afford to pay back through the federal program right now.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Representative Wilcox.
Ed, Dolphin Island Ferry, I didn't send this to you in advance, but it was closed down June 25th and 26th for some emergency repairs.
Yes, ma'am.
They're excellent about communicating using social media and stuff, but can you tell me what was the nature of those emergency repairs?
I think it had to do with some mechanical issues with the ferry. Tony, do you? Yeah, let me get in touch with our region engineer. I don't want to tell you for sure. I remember him telling me that they had some issues with the ferry, but I don't know if it was mechanical.
Well, we did have it down one time for mechanical, but then it was some dockside damages or something?
It was an issue with the dock? Okay. My apologies. I did not ask that particular question, so I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. But if you'll let me inquire with our region, I'll be happy to get.
And I apologize. I meant to send that to you in advance, but it was down, and it's been down a couple of times. Like I said, they're real good about communicating, but that is just a big part of our tourism this time of the year.
Well, absolutely, and I hope it's not a situation where something hit the dock or a vehicle came off of the ferry or something and hit it. But yeah, let me inquire with our region, and I'll get somebody to get you an answer as quickly as we can.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
So Ed, if you will, just stay there, and you can go into the fund allocation and then the STIP. Everybody should have a handout on these.
So the fund allocation plan in front of you, 4 pages approximately. This is similar document that we've done for the last, I guess, 4 years now of JTC. We'll go through just our program budgets, federal funds. If you recall, when the IIJA passed, we've talked about this previously, that there are now new programs through IIJA. We're calling those very creatively IIJ new programs. You see those highlighted in red. Those what we call legacy programs, which are the ones that we've had historically in previous federal transportation acts, is the legacy. That's what the legacy program means. So this year, a little over $971 million of federal funds through the legacy programs. And those are the programs like National Highway and safety and surface transportation. Those are the projects we resurface our interstates with, replace our bridges, do safety widenings, and address other safety issues, those kinds of projects. The IIJ new programs we'll go over in just a minute. At the bottom, state public road and bridge funds, our projected budget for that is $530 million. Rebuild Alabama Act is about $200 million before some of the requirements come off that we'll go over in just a minute. From the federal funds, so our aids to locals, cities, counties, MPOs, about $137 million. The Garvey bond, ATRIP, and CBD payments, as we were talking about a minute ago, almost 110. There's our safety money that I was talking about, just almost, well, a little over 59 million. Interstate maintenance, and these are federal portions, so you'll see on the next page under our state funds, all these require state match to go with them. 180 million for interstate maintenance, state route resurfacing, 232 million, system enhancement, where we're trying to either add capacity or improve traffic flow, something that increases the viability of the existing facility, 138 million, bridge replacements, basically 94 million, and then our statewide planning to do many of these projects is about 22 million. So in the red are those new programs that we talked about. Carbon reduction is about 25 million. Protect formula is 28.6. That's the resiliency-based program. Our bridge formula program, we get the statutory minimum of 45 million a year. Electric vehicle formula this year is almost 17 million, and as we have been doing from the onset of this program, ADECA is serving as a lead for the NEVI, what's called NEVI, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. They were already running point for the VW settlement, so it was determined that the wisest move would not be to double efforts, and so ADECA has been serving as a lead there. And then we get about $155,000 a year for federal ferry boat and terminal program. And so that's the federal part of the plan. God bless you. Next page, state public road and bridge funds. There's the match that I was talking about, almost 154 million. We also have to match the Garvey bond payments for both CBD and ATRIP 1, the original ATRIP program. That's about 4 million. Our state routine maintenance is 157.5. There's several other maintenances that fall underneath there. Altogether, our state maintenance is about 190, between 190 and 200 million. State construction is about 19 million. Administrative overhead is 95 million. Other equipment is 12 million. Land and buildings, 9. County engineer salary support, 8. There's the Aaliyah Transfer Center that you were talking about that will be able to come off next year. Industrial access statutorily is required to be $11 million. $1 million to the comptroller's office for services. Years ago, several counties became what's called captive counties, and they became state employees. That are probably phased out in the late 80s to early 90s, but we still have some of those employees who have retired that are on our payroll, so to speak, from a retirement standpoint. So we have $125,000 worth of insurance requirements there. The Revenue Department, 3.7 million. Another transfer to Aaliyah that's 1.2 from Act 2021 365. $1.7 million to state personnel, and then $500,000 to state parks. So that sums up the $530 million of state public road and bridge funds. Next page is showing you what we're proposing to do for Rebuild Alabama this year and what we will propose to do next year. ATRIP 2 has already been awarded. That was done in mid to late January. It was a $40 million program this year. The local assistance program, we just did the second round of that probably 2 weeks ago with one round remaining. It is statutorily required to be 10 million. The ATRIP 2 program is statutorily required to be between 30 and 50 million. County-federal fund exchange, I think we've talked about this before. The counties were getting federal funds prior to rebuild, wanted out of the federal system, and so we swapped them an amount of rebuild money and get the federal money back from there, or just don't transfer it to them, but that cost us $26.8 million out of our rebuild allocation. And then what's left is about 61.6 each, evenly divided, and it doesn't always work out evenly based on how much projects cost, but we try to keep it as reasonably evenly divided between system enhancement and economic development as we can. The last part of the law allows us to spend money for match purposes, for system preservation, or for 100% if we chose to. So far, we have not had to really do that, so we're showing that as a zero currently. And same thing for 24. Right now, we're proposing the same numbers. The $40 million for A-Trip 2 will not be set until next month. We'll send out a call for applications later in the month of August. Last page just gives you a breakdown of system enhancement economic development funding. I think it was asked about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, by this committee for us to add this page, and so it shows you what we propose to do, what we did this year, what we propose to do next year. The federal funds, along with our state match, will be $168 million this year. We'll use about $10 million to do worth of state funds to do system enhancement, economic development, and then Rebuild Alabama about $123.2 million this year, and then there's a slight increase. There's an escalation amount built into IIJA, so it went up $5 million next year. So our intention will be to reflect that increase in that regard.
Okay. Are there questions concerning the allocation plan?
One, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Elliott.
Ed, on the economic development line item, I'm curious as to what type of projects those are, or is there a list of projects? You've got the same number here in both years. That's fine. Just was curious, is there a list of those projects specifically we can look at?
I can get one. I'm off the top of my head. Let me try to throw a few at you, Senator, and I'll probably leave some off. So the first economic development project we did was US 411, I think, in Representative Shaver's district. Let's see, what else have we done? 82 in Prattville might have had some economic development money associated with it. I'd need to go back and look. State Route 52 down in Geneva County, we've let the first phase of that project, and it's got several phases left to go. Of course, West Alabama, what little bit we've done there so far has been through economic development. Seems like there's another one, and I'm drawing a blank, Senator. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me.
You can just send that to us.
Yeah, that's fine.
But that's a good overview. That gives me an idea what we're talking about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Ed.
Other questions? Okay. Well, we will take that for review and file that. Also, the other requirement that you had for this meeting was the statewide transportation improvement program.
Yes, and I'm gonna turn that over to Mr. Harris. He has been handling that for us.
Okay.
Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Chairman and members, we're required under the law to update you about the State Transportation Improvement Program at this meeting. You have a link to it. You have a handout that provides some information. And most of you know now, we've worked very hard over the last few years to be sure our website provides a good repository for accessing that information. And so you'll find the current STIP on our website. Most of you are aware that during the last few months, the last 6 months or so, we have been involved in the process of updating the statewide transportation improvement program. We've conducted well over 50 meetings around the state. Those meetings are conducted by our regions and our central office, by the metropolitan planning organizations, and by the regional planning organizations. Much of what you find in the STIP originates or is generated at the local level, and so it includes all that local input, and it also includes our projects. The draft STIP is on the ALDOT website at that same link that you have information on how to find. I tell people when they ask me how to find that on the website, I go to the search box in the right top corner and I type in the word STIP, the letters STIP, and that's how I find it on our website. It's just the easiest way for me to do it, and it would be for you as well, I think. We are, again, that draft is developed and is under review. It has to be reviewed by ALDOT, by the local officials in the planning process, and by the Federal Highway Administration. Our goal is to have that finalized and ready to begin the fiscal year. And that new STIP will cover fiscal years 2024 through 2027. It's a 4-year plan.
4-year. Okay, that was going to be my question. I couldn't remember if it's 4 or 5, so it's a 4-year.
4-year plan. That's federally mandated.
All right. Comments or questions concerning the STIP?
Me again, Mr. Chairman.
Again.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to tell you how much I appreciate the updates and work you've done on the STIP and how much easier it is to digest the data that is there. I know Representative Wilcox had pushed that early on when we started this I guess it was last quadrennium. So it's a lot easier to use. How many amendments are we up to now to the current STIP?
About as many as the state constitution has.
And to fully understand it, you've got to look at those amendments in context with each other. So if you're trying to look at it, you have to look at all those together. But it is much easier than it was in the past. So kudos, I appreciate that. It is now possible, although not easy, to comprehend what's going on there.
And thank you, Senator. Work in progress. We hope to make continued improvements. And I'm giving Representative Shedd a tutorial on how to use the information after the meeting.
Well, I would say if you put together a plan for 4 years and you didn't have amendments to it, I'd say you're probably not doing your job keeping it updated, because things change.
Yeah, there's obviously a need to be responsive to the things that evolve, and that's what the amendment process is for.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Representative Wilcox.
I had a handout here that I guess was sent to me in March, the Aeronautics Bureau Grant Program Guidelines from Alabama Act 2022-270. Provides the one-time allocation of $3.5 million. Does anybody have an update on if we've had any successes with this?
Is that the
Aeronautics Bureau Grant Program Guidelines?
Okay.
Should have sent it in advance. It was just in my stack to ask about.
I know I prepared that information for the members of the legislature. I think there's a requirement in the Budget Act that we provide the members of the legislature with the guidelines each year. That is, if
you've complied, because I got it, but
right, and I think
trying to figure out what to do with it. And
I think that's the pot of, money that the local airports can apply for, and we continuously administer that program. So the airports are applying every year, receiving funds and grants through that program.
Oh, okay. So the way I read it, it was a new program, and I just didn't know if there was something we should all hear about.
I don't think so, Representative. I know there is a line in the last few budgets that made money available for any airport relocating passenger service, and that's a very narrow definition, and we're working with that one airport that's eligible for that to put together their funding that they're eligible to receive.
Tony, Mr. Harris, if you would you resend that to us? I got it. I remember reviewing it, but
absolutely,
it was while we're in session. And,
it is, yes.
Just be honest, we probably didn't focus on it like we needed to at the time.
Sure.
So if you'll resend it, I'll send it out to you.
I have that as a PDF form. I'll get it to the clerk and get it to all of you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me get back to my agenda. The only other item I had on the agenda was the Alabama Port Authority. Thank you, Mr. Harris. The article that happened to come out this morning from Alabama Daily News. I hope I don't get in trouble for reproducing without permission, but I did. But we did give them credit. So it just was something that, we don't always see the benefit of the decisions that we make. And through the Rebuild Alabama Act, we did invest money in the port. And this is just some good information that shows that, in my opinion, it's certainly paying off. So the volume down there has increased, the revenue's increased. So anyway, I just thought that'd be good for each of you to have. Okay, with that, that's all of my agenda. Is there anybody that has anything to bring before the committee? All right, seeing none, we will stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Let me say one thing. If y'all on the online, if y'all will just hold for just a second, I was going to ask Ms. Yvonne if she will just read the names of everyone that we have in attendance. So if you hear your name, that means we have you down as attended. There are a few that are not here. So it might just, because when I was online, I was always like, well, does she know I'm here or not? So if you will just read those who are in attendance.
Allen, Baker, Chambliss, Elliott, Hall, Hollis, Lawrence, McCampbell, Marcus, Milson, Paramore, Price, Sells, Session, Shaver, Shed, Singleton, Smitherman, Wilcox, Wood.
Okay. If you are in attendance and you did not hear your name, just let us know. Thank you all.
You said Schofield, didn't you?
That's a good idea.
Man, if you want to keep it.